First off, we have Zubaida Bai, the president and CEO of Grameen Foundation, who joined the organization in November. We also have Lauren Hendricks, a board member of Grameen Foundation and a co-founder of KEIPhone. She was also in the past Grameenie as well. So welcome, Zubaida and Lauren. We'll let you take it from here. I will say before we begin to hold your questions to the chat or to the Q&A feature. We'll allow about 10 to 15 minutes at the end of the event to address them. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Jen. I appreciate it. Zubaida, welcome.
Thank you, Lauren. Welcome to you too.
Thanks. Now, Zubaida, you joined Grameen Foundation recently, and you are such an impressive woman. And you and I had the opportunity to talk as you were joining, and we've met a couple times at board meetings, but you and I have not ever sat down one-on-one and had a conversation. And so I'm looking forward to doing that. And I welcome everybody who's going to eavesdrop on it a little bit.
Sounds good. Yeah, I mean, like, it's funny that Lauren and I have our first one-on-one conversation virtually in this post-COVID virtual world. So I'm excited, Lauren.
I think it's a good reflection of both of our lives and relationships. Yes. Now, Zubaida, you have such an interesting background. You have 18 years of experience in the social impact space. You founded your own social enterprise in India, focused on healthcare products to improve the lives of women and girls. You were the managing director of social ventures at CARE. So the social enterprise space is clearly somewhere near and dear to your heart. You're a recognized global leader. The World Economic Forum has named you a young global leader. You're a TED speaker and a TED fellow. You're a SDG 3 pioneer with the United Nations Global Compact. You're a visiting social innovator at Harvard University's Social Innovation Change Initiative. Quite an impressive background. Why Grameen Foundation?
Thank you, Lauren. I think for me, Grameen is a culmination of what I would say has been a passion of my life, maybe since I even realized I had one, which is to bring women and girls at the center and have a seat at the table, right? I grew up in India, obviously in a very patriarchal culture, not only within my household, but everything around me. And I also chose a very patriarchal profession, which is mechanical engineering, right? And so for me, having a seat at the table was so important ever since I was young. And I think unknowingly, I developed the capacity to potentially fight against the headwinds that were against women and girls all around me, to the point that many young girls in my life and around me and in my family were never allowed to talk to me because I was so outspoken and I was always going to talk about issues that I saw with them, right? So for me, I think that has been something that's within me, has been me for decades since I was a child. And Grameen Foundation gives me that platform to be a voice for women and girls globally, especially because we all know that women and girls fail to thrive and achieve their full potential, not because they cannot, but because everything works against them. And how do we convert those headwinds to tailwinds has been a purpose of my life. And I think Grameen's a perfect platform to do that. And, you know, I want to turn that back to you, Lauren. Like, what brings you to women and girls, and what brings you, you know, of course, we're converting headwinds to tailwinds. There's a lot Grameen does in market shaping. There's a lot Grameen does in gender and education, and financial inclusion. But what brought you to working with women and girls? And you work in such an important space of bringing that digital lens to it and scaling what we do exponentially. So why don't we turn the table around and ask you what's happening there on that side?
Well, it's interesting because I came to it from a very different space. My background has been, my whole career has been financial inclusion. That's where I started. It's what I'm passionate about. It's interesting. I always wanted to be a creative person, but what I'm actually good at is math. And so financial inclusion was the kind of space that I could bring my creativity and my math head together to try and kind of solve financial inclusion problems. And when you're in the financial inclusion space, there's one leader in that space globally, and that's Grameen Foundation. It started microfinance. It spread it globally. And so when I had the chance to come over to Grameen, I grabbed it with both hands. And it really shaped me so much being a part of Grameen. You talk about, and we can talk more about it later, but now I've moved into the kind of digital space and focusing on women's digital access. But that really comes from my experience at Grameen. Grameen was such an innovator in the digital technology space and how to use different technologies to impact women's lives. And it really opened my eyes and really helped me think about technology in a very different way and in a way that can be very enabling for women and girls. And so that's definitely something that I came away from my time and experience at Grameen really thankful for. So Grameen really helped me expand beyond financial inclusion and see women's and girls' lives much more holistically as well, thinking about it from a agriculture, food security, health, from all the different aspects of a woman's life, not just her access to finance.
That makes a lot of sense.
And I think for both of us, Zubaida, it's interesting because obviously we're both women and we bring that. You were talking kind of a little bit about your perspectives, your life perspective, some of the things that being a girl and a woman growing up in a hierarchical society, how that influenced you. Talk to me a little bit more about that.
I think for me, like I said, I didn't necessarily think that this is what I was going to do, right? Like I was outspoken, I saw the need, I was able to talk about it, but I don't think it was well received. But I enjoyed talking about it so much because it gave me a sense of fulfillment, even though I couldn't live that the powerful life I wanted to. I could ask questions on why not. And for me, I think that the journey of being this woman engineer in a space that was, I was the only engineer, I should say me and one more girl were the only engineers in my class, or mechanical engineers in my class. And I was like, oh my God, I want to go to a country where women are at the forefront, internet access was less. I would sneak money from my mother and be like, Mama, please give me some money. Like I need to go sit on the internet and find out what's happening. Where are the girls more empowered? And Sweden ended up being the country where this was practically possible. And it was supposed to be the most technologically advanced, gender progressive country. And lo and behold, even there were 2 mechanical engineers, right? And so when I did my master's, I felt like the world was definitely a place where I was questioning everything around me. And so when I came back to India and I had this huge corporate job, but I found this opportunity to do engineering for women and girls, I obviously chose that. And doing engineering at the last mile and recognizing the lack of gender in design in agriculture and healthcare products, I think is what really shaped the professional me, right? I would go in to hospitals where I would see newborn neonates on the floor and come running out. And I obviously had mentors who said, Zubaida, you understand this problem. You're emotionally attached to it. You need to go back and do something about this, right? And so for me, it was more using the power of me being a woman, using the empathy that I had, but also understanding the grassroots issue in a way that I was privileged to see, right? I can call myself disadvantaged for having grown in that sector. But for me, I used every single aspect of my life as a privilege, as an opportunity. And I think that's what helped me come out of where I was technically. And also, I think the downside of that was also that I was a very reluctant leader, and so that's something that you see in gender and diversity issues today is like corporations are training women to be leaders, but they're not necessarily understanding that there is a huge identity shift that is needed in women. Even in leaders like you and I, to believe that we are leaders, we are change makers, to say that we are in position of power with our voice that we need to use. So I would, in the first 4 years of my entrepreneurial life, I would tell everybody, I'm not a leader, I'm not a feminist, I'm just here talking about something, until I had a few mentors sit me down and say, you have to shut up. You don't say this, right? It's okay if you don't believe you're a leader, but don't say it. Just go out and do your thing. And it's going to show up, right? The mere fact of you showing up and the ability of you to show up, even when people say no to you, is something that you should cultivate and keep. If you're going to keep saying you're not this and you're not that, you're going to fail. So even if you don't believe it, just show up and don't say anything negative about yourself, right? And I think that identity shift consistently from being a young girl to a woman, to an engineer, to a professional, to my transition from private sector to NGO world, I think it's been huge for me. And I again, coming back to Grameen, I think there is an opportunity for us to create that identity shift in women at the last mile, which can only happen by representation and empathy that we bring to the table. I don't know if you have a similar experience, Lauren, of leadership as a woman leader in this space. I'm sure you do.
You know, in some ways I do, and in some ways I don't. It's interesting you talk about your mother and how she, would secretly slip you the money you needed to get online and access what you needed. My mother is just the strongest person I know. And so I always had that role model of there was no need for me to shrink away from what I wanted or what I thought I could be, because my mother was just the example in our household of what women could achieve. She was a school teacher, and she was sorry, did I? Oh, for a second I thought I logged myself out. I'm so sorry. Anyway, she was a school teacher, and she went on to be the assistant superintendent in her district. And even though my dad was in the Air Force and we moved a lot, her career was never second tier in our household, nor were her wants. And she really taught me that I should never put myself second tier in any relationship, or in anything that I wanted. Not that all relationships don't have balance, but she really set that example for me. And so it's interesting to hear, that your mother did that a little bit quietly, but also that you had female mentors that played that role in your life who helped you kind of step into your space. And I think that that's something that's so important to all women, right? That we step up for each other. And there's no woman I know that is in a position of leadership that doesn't have stories about how other women helped her get there. And I think that's one of the reasons that the work that Grameen does in enabling female agents, whether that's a female mobile money agent or an agent who helps provide women access to healthcare, or someone who's helping increase agricultural harvest, but we're always focused on finding women who can help other women. And I think that's such an important aspect of the work that we do.
For sure. And I think Grameen also works with this whole notion, right? Like our founding father, clearly, Dr. Yunus spoke about how women are the center of the family, and how enabling them allows us to enable communities in a very meaningful way. And Grameen does that beautifully in terms of using women and their power as stepping stones towards achieving the future sustainability and getting people out of poverty. And again, I know poverty is very multidimensional, but Grameen works at it from many different dimensions at this point in a way that we focus on ecosystems that are successful. So you're absolutely right there.
Yeah, which brings me to you were kind of talking about turning headwinds into tailwinds. And I think that's such an elegant way of talking about Grameen's ecosystem approach, which is to think about all the different systems that are impacting a woman's life, and how to look at the barriers that they represent now and how to flip those barriers into opportunities. And so I'm gonna steal the turning headwinds into tailwinds. But talk to me a little bit about that. And you've really encouraged Grameen to focus in on that ecosystem approach. And so talk to me a little bit about why you think that's so important and how you think Grameen is tackling it.
We started the conversation with this, right? That women fail to thrive and achieve their full potential because everything works against them. Everything that we have, including like UN Women says this very beautifully, he for she, right? We leave the men out of the conversation. We're talking about 100 years to achieve gender equality. What about equity, right? What about what about creating ecosystems for women where women are brought along and men are brought along so they know how to survive and thrive together? Because I think where the development community has failed a little bit is that we invested resources in creating systems, processes, infrastructures, and then bringing the men and women in a way that we haven't gotten them ready and walked them with us. And I think for me, being an engineer and having that brain, it's very important that you take your stakeholder insights because they're the one who are going to be users of your product, right? So I think creating those enabling systems with women and girls at the forefront, and especially given that there's 1 billion women in the world who don't have access to markets, who don't have access to bank accounts, who don't have access to even kind of figuring out what's the way to get into the world. I think it's important for Grameen to lead with building ecosystems with women and girls at the center in a meaningful way, because that's work, that's hard work. That's work that's not appreciated. That's work that people don't want to do because you don't see outcomes immediately. And Grameen has been a pioneer in doing that thankless job, I would say, in building those, but we never speak about it. Right. And I think this is an opportunity for us to speak about it in a meaningful way so people understand. And I think the gender piece and the ecosystem piece is front and center of what we do. And it's important that we speak about it over and over again. And maybe this is the right time, Lauren, for you to talk about how we build these ecosystems on the shoulders of digital, right? Like, what are the barriers that you see in digital ecosystems for women, because that's a huge vertical of building ecosystems for gender. And that's a barrier. And it would be great to hear about how KEIPhone is solving that.
Yeah, thanks so much. And it just struck me what you were saying about building things and then going out to to your clients. And I think that's kind of in some ways what prompted me to start KEIPhone. So at KEIPhone, we are looking to get digital devices and data into the hands of women. The world is going digital. For the vast majority of people in developing nations, they'll never have a landline phone. They'll never have a computer. Everything will be done on a smartphone. But yet we are seeing the gap in smartphone ownership and the digital divide grow and grow and grow. So we are seeing in some countries, particularly in South Asia, where there's a 40 or 50% gap between the number of women who own smartphones and the number of men who own smartphones. And we're seeing almost no progress on that globally. And so it's really a challenge because women are being left behind, whether it's telehealth and mobile health, whether it's digital agriculture, whether it's access to finances, everything is going digital. The big global movement in fintech has been super exciting, and a lot of it is designed and funded by donors with the purpose of getting women access to financial services. But if women don't have a device on which to access all these new digital services, they're being doubly excluded. They're excluded because they're not traditional clients, and then they're excluded because the new products and services are on devices that they can't access and they don't own. So KEIPhone is really designed to get devices into women's hands. I can't tell you how many people used to come to me, still come to me and say, I created this great app for women to help to get them access to markets, but they can't, but can you help me because none of the women are using it because they don't have devices. I'm like, well, then why did you create an app to begin with? Why didn't you talk to the women first, find out what they had access to, and then create something that they could use? Anyway, so KEIPhone is pretty simple. We put ads on the lock screens of our phones, and we use ad-based revenue to provide access to devices. So in the way that Google or Facebook uses ad revenue to cover the cost of their services, we use ad revenue to cover the cost of getting access to devices in developing countries. And it's really just a game changer. There's been some really good RCT research done that simply for a woman in Africa, simply owning a smartphone can increase her income by 24%. And I think one of the things that, there's all the metrics about it. But the most interesting thing to me is just the ability of a woman to connect outside of her household and outside of her community. And I know you see this too. Women are often so isolated by their poverty, by the distance at which they live. for other places, for rural women, by the grinding tedium of the work that they do and the long hours that they put in, it all leads to isolation that a digital device can help overcome.
No, Lauren, I think that's such an important part in a core pillar of what Grameen does as well, right? And from my experience of working as a product developer and in global health and in women's health, we always go to women after the fact. We're going to talk to them about puberty after the fact. We talk to them about pregnancy when they're pregnant. We talk to them about menopause after the fact. There is never a conversation with women to give her the skills and tools and the education she needs before she gets into that space, right? And again, the lack of, I think there is a statistics that says the lack of gender inclusion and the impact in the social impact sector is costing the world about $6 trillion, And that's a huge number, merely because we don't include gender in the conversations that we have in the social impact world, right? And I think that's, and the work that KEIPhone is doing is a core pillar of that, because Grameen can create ecosystems, but then that can be amplified tenfold if the digital divide is narrowed down. And we all know that I think there is a statistic that says 50% of the time men are doing things that are irrelevant to the household on the phone, whereas 100% of time women are doing things that are relevant to her and the household, to the point that many mobile companies have gone in and started giving them loans based on their talk time, because they have productive conversations, which is what we believe, that when women are on phone, they're chit-chatting, which they're not, right? And so companies have realized the value of them talking on the phone and giving them loans based on that. Like, that's worth something, for sure.
Absolutely, absolutely. Although I don't want to discount the value of women having time for chit-chat. I think it's something we should all strive for, because women are so time poor because they have so many responsibilities, that I want to strive to a place where women in developing countries do feel like they can just chit chat with their girlfriends or their daughter who's traveled to the big city on the phones.
And that's the value of ecosystem building, Lauren. That's where we create ecosystems where all this time and grueling household work is actually giving them the meaning of what they're doing and the flexibility and the acknowledgement of what they're doing on an everyday basis, for them to be successful and be able to do more for their families, including men in their lives.
Yeah. And I want to tell one story, if you don't mind, Zubaida, just to drive home, because I think, and you talk about this a lot in your ecosystem approach, just about how important access to information is. And so I'll tell one story about one of my colleagues, who you may know as well. And when I was in the field, and this was in Bangladesh, and she was telling a story about an auntie of hers who had a baby, and that baby was young and got sick with a diarrheal disease. And at the time in that village, the thinking was, oh, they have too much water in their bodies, and so that's why they're having diarrhea. So we should withhold water so they can dry up and the diarrhea can stop. But really, the child is dehydrated, and so the child ended up dying because that family didn't have the information they needed, that actually what the baby needed was more liquids, not less. And that mother who's trying to do the best she knows for her child, right? She thinks she's doing the best thing. She had a phone in her hand and could call a pretty basic healthcare provider, a nurse, or even a community health worker, and ask them what to do when her child has diarrhea. She would have gotten an answer that was said, very simply, give some water, put some sodium in that water, and the baby will be better. So, we could talk, all we want about the theory of giving women access to all this, but in the end, what it comes down to is a real and significant impact in their day-to-day lives.
And that comes down to, if women have the right information, they can move mountains, right? And in the spirit of stories, I remember being in a refugee camp about 3 years ago now in northern Kenya. And there was this whole conversation about gender and, women not being respected in their households. And it seemed more to me like a matriarchal society because most refugee camps are run that way. I think men get really bogged down under pressure, whereas women can thrive under pressure, at least most of them, 80% of them that I know. And so the whole story here goes that these women were sent on the other side to fetch water every week. And every time they went, the host communities who hated the refugee population ended up raping the women that went on the other side. So the conversation was, this is against gender norms, and we shouldn't be sending women there. We need to be sending men to fetching water. And that was the conversation that everybody was having, until the point that there was a woman who stood up. This was a heated discussion, right? Like, we were all powerful women, and there was a lot of women talking about this is against human rights and we can't let this happen, all that nonsense. And then this woman stood up and said, okay, we hear everything that you're saying, but honestly, this is such a waste of time because we're okay being raped. And everybody went, what? And so she was like, the host community is so mad that if we sent our men there, they'd all be killed. We would have nobody. And so for us, being raped every week is okay than getting our men killed and not having a protective layer with us, right? And so sometimes we take gender to the extent of like, we understand, we want to solve problems, but most of these women have answers to their problems, right? They just need to be able to. So instead of solving this is a much bigger humanitarian crisis issue, which is solving the host and the refugee community issue. We were not fixing the root of the problem. We were trying to fix a gender issue where it didn't exist, right? So, and I think that's where the whole gender conversation is so important, and understanding a woman's perspective is so important, and the context and the culture, the meaning of it, the value of it is also different in every context. And building ecosystems is the only way for us to harvest these thoughts, these ideas, this power, so we are able to help societies in a meaningful way and not necessarily try to plug in solutions where we don't need to. And understanding gender and bringing it at the forefront is going to be the most important piece of that conversation.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Now, you've used the word ecosystem several times, and I know we've had a lot of conversations about what that word means. I wonder, and it can be a bit abstract. I wonder if you can give a concrete example of what you mean when you talk about ecosystem in a woman's life.
Let's take a situation where there is a gender-based violence victim and she's out of her family with 2 children and she's not able to, she doesn't know where to start, right? So when Grameen interferes in, or when Grameen is able to provide support in this area, the ecosystem allows us to not only create dialogues, conversations at the household level of what's impacting this woman, but also conversations with financial institutions to create loan products for this woman, right? Which otherwise would never give her the loan, would never look at her as a valuable customer. We will also, I think there is also this local organization capacity building that we do to support women like her, who otherwise would never be supported in an efficient manner which will have an outcome for her. So rather than letting her slide down in poverty, we do everything from household dialogues for gender-based violence training, understanding what it takes, training microfinance institutions or financial institutions on what loan products to look for, how to take the risk with that kind of a woman, and connecting her to markets, right? So I think this is one small example of how we do. Now, in terms of a smallholder farmer, we probably provide, with our partners, provide training on what kind of seeds to get, how to take care of her soil, how to get additional income using carbon credits, right? And so there's different ways we intervene for a support to be more holistic. And that's where our approach of working with local partners and enabling local partners to provide that support is a core part of building ecosystems, right? We aren't going and implementing 90% of our projects. We are enabling organizations at the local level. We are identifying the right organizations, the right issues to tackle, and taking care of it end to end. And I think that's where the whole ecosystem piece comes in. And maybe we would
No.
work with you someday, Lauren, to bring in the digital piece and make it even more complete, which I know is not far off in the future.
Well, and actually, for those of you who don't know, one of the reasons my coloring is funny is I'm in Uganda right now. And I just met with Bindi, who is your Uganda rep here, to talk about working together on a project in one of the refugee camps. So we're really excited about the possibilities for that.
For sure. And I think that's a very exciting project where we're bringing refugee entrepreneurs and connecting them to markets and having a digital, we already have a digital intervention, but having a tool like KEIPhone to enable that digital intervention would be amazing. And thank you for starting that conversation.
Yes, we're very excited. And I think a lot of people don't know, but in Africa, Uganda actually hosts the largest number of refugees across the continent. So it's a huge issue here. And at the same time, the government here is one of the most progressives in terms of refugee rights. So refugees are allowed to work here. They're allowed to integrate into communities. So there is a lot of opportunity to take an ecosystem approach to look at how you can integrate refugees into markets, how they can have employment, how they can sell and buy from local markets. And a phone is a critical piece of making sure that they get connected, especially, for those who have traveled far from home.
I know, and Lauren, it'll be nice as a Grameen yourself and as somebody who sits on the board of Grameen Foundation and as an entrepreneur, what's your perspective and take on the work that Grameen does in ecosystem building, and where do you think we could do better, and where do you think we do our best?
Oh, that's a good question. No, because I think Grameen has always, I think because we work in partnership, rather than looking to kind of implement everything ourselves, Grameen has always been very good at taking an ecosystem approach. I think Zubaida, as you come in, you're going to really hone that quite a bit. But it is, I think, part of Grameen's history. I'll give an example also from here in Uganda, but when I was with Grameen and in this refugee community we were working in, Grameen was looking at a financial inclusion program and helping refugees get access to mobile money, which had a lot of implications. Refugees here receive a stipend from UNHCR. Many of them get that in cash. So they literally have to, like, hundreds of thousands of them have to line up once a month to get cash in their hand. And those that do get a digital payment, because UNHCR is trying to push everyone to get a digital payment. There are so few people in the community that accept digital payments that many of them, they may get the money in their digital wallets on the first of the month, but it may take them 10 days until they're able to cash that out and use that money to buy food for their household. And so we at Grameen came in to help digitize the payments, but also to work with the local telecom partner here, which is called MTN, to build out an entire agent network across the camps, but also to do what's called merchant acceptance, so that people who are selling food could take digital money rather than cash money, so that the day a refugee got her payment in her wallet, she could use that money to buy food for her family. So asking a hungry family that to wait 10 days to be able to use their resources makes absolutely no sense. So Grameen was able to come in and play that ecosystem role. We were able to bring UNHCR, the mobile network operator, the company that ran the agent network, bring all of those people to the table together and build out a plan that put an ecosystem in place that allowed women to access their money the day that they received it in order to feed their families.
No, that's beautiful, Lauren. Thank you for sharing. And I think that also happens in the Uganda refugee project now, where we have a technology intervention called LedgerLink, where we're able to use the transactions of these business people to connect them with financial institutions, because they're able to see their transactions, but otherwise there was no trust between the two parties, right, two stakeholders. So I think that, again, the ecosystem wordplay is very broad and it's very hard to understand. But when you put it in context, I think everything that we do is for Grameen to leave a footprint that the activity that we started continues beyond our existence. right? So when we go into a particular location, a particular problem, a particular setting, a project, we strive to work in a meaningful way so that when we walk out, the project doesn't end. The activity that we started doesn't end. And I think that's where the whole focus will be. And we haven't been highlighting that part of our work, which I think is sad. And I'm very excited to be able to bring that to the forefront.
Absolutely. And I think we've been talking a lot about some of the kind of extreme humanitarian cases, but I think Grameen also does it in the day-to-day kind of business lives of women. I'm thinking about Ghana and some of the agricultural programs we have there, which are, again, about building that ecosystem out around women to connect them to markets. So making sure that women are on the front end receiving the information that they need in order to successfully grow crops and increase their kind of crop production, making sure that they're receiving the financing they need up front, so they're able to make the investments in the farm that they need to increase production, but then also making sure that they're connected to markets on the back end, so that when they have that production, they're not having to sell it at the farm gate at the cheapest price. They're able to connect to larger markets and sell it for a better price because they're hooked into a larger market. And that's also the type of ecosystem that Grameen is really great at pulling together. Again, because we look at partnering with local organizations, we're able to pull all the players together to make those ecosystems work for women.
For sure. Great. I don't know. What else? What other questions do I have for you here?
Well, I'm going to ask you another question because we've talked a lot about women. And I know the question that I always get asked is, well, what about the men? Where do men fit into your conceptualization of, if Grameen's going to focus on women and girls, what about the men?
Like I said, I am a big believer of he for she, right? There is absolutely no way you can help women show up with their full power without having men understand that power. And as much as the society believes and has ingrained the fact that weak men are next to strong women, I think it takes a much stronger man to be next to a strong woman, right? And I have examples in my life where the strength that the men in my life need to stand up for somebody like me is way more. And I appreciate that and I honor that. And I think that's what Grameen tries to do. Everything from our household dialogues, where we want to make sure that if a woman starts earning more than a man, the man isn't going to make her a victim of gender-based violence, but it's going to appreciate her, is going to see her as an important module of the family so he can grow with her rather than looking at her as a threat. That's a core part of our household dialogues initiative. Our gender-based violence training, I think it's all about understanding the power of women and respecting it. The mere fact that we work with financial institutions, not just from a perspective, and Lauren, you know this, having been in financial inclusion for so long, is opening a bank account or getting access is not financial inclusion, right? There is so much more to it in terms of women having access to a digital tool, women being able to use that tool, women being able to use that tool to actually achieve their full potential, having access to loan products, not being afraid to take loans that are above and beyond and taking risks with that, right? Because as women, we are never taught to take risks and we are never given the opportunity to take risk, right? There are far and few between who take the risks, and also knowing that every risk is not going to be successful. And I think as a society, Grameen works with that with men all along. I know we are trying to work with young girls now, and people keep asking me, why only girls? I said, we lead with girls, but if we don't have the boys, then we aren't creating a future of equitable society that both men and women can thrive together in, and we have to take them along. I think that's the theme, right? It's a he for she. It's important that we take the men, and the more power we give women, the more power men need, because it takes a lot of energy and strength to be next to a powerful woman. And I think it's high time we all recognize it. I think you would agree.
Absolutely. And I think, men are as trapped in gender roles in these communities as women are. They don't often see the alternatives. And, you talk about the Gender Dialogues program, which I am just such a huge fan of. And shout out to Bobby Gray, one of your team members who really led the work on that. And I think one of the things that really struck me about it, it's set up as a dialogue. It's set up as a household conversation. And the work was funded by the Gates Foundation, who loved it. And every time I see them, they talk to me about it. But one of the things to ask a household to do was sit down and talk about, put money to the side, right? What are your household priorities? What do you want to accomplish as a family? And often you find the husband and wife in that household have never had that conversation. It's just not common in that community for husband and wives to talk about their joint goals and their joint financial goals. And once they both agree, okay, our household goal is make sure our kids get through secondary school or make sure we can buy this plot of land, then you have the conversation about, okay, how does each person in this relationship contribute to that goal? And for men, then it's a lot easier to say, oh, okay, well, I see the purpose now of the work that my wife is doing. She's contributing to our joint goal. But part of that goal can also be for her, and he can understand how he can contribute to, maybe the goal is that she can open a business and start. And so some of the savings they do is around that. And, I think like in every household, money isn't actually about money. It's about goals and priorities and values. And it's just not that common for a lot of households to have those conversations, and facilitating those conversations in a way that then can lead to joint goal setting, joint priority making is such an important way of ensuring that we're not just working with women, but that we're creating strong families.
For sure. That's such an important part, right, of how we work. So clearly, I think there is the direction that Grameen's taking in terms of moving away from the word empowerment to coming into the fact that we are mere enablers of such conversations, enablers of building supporting systems for women to show up with their power, right? And whatever the power that they want to reach, in whatever the situations we can create for them to aspire to have more power, I think all that is what we do amazingly well, starting from, like you rightly described, the household conversation, but all the way through, right? And me having been in various forums, I think when we started the whole gender march and, we had all this huge outcry about sexual harassment in corporations, there was this aspect where men had stopped mentoring women. And I used to sit on a global advisory council, and that was a huge issue we were discussing, because we were like, why didn't we tell the men what our problem is? Why did we go ahead and launch such a big campaign without taking the men along? To now leading that to a situation where women weren't able to get support from senior leaders who are 99% men, right? And so, even at a global level, we make mistakes like that, right? And so for us being educated people, if we can make those mistakes in the last mile, they are naturally to happen because of how the culture is formed. And so starting with those simple conversations are very meaningful, and that work warms my heart, like you rightly said.
Yep. I think we're getting a message from Jen that we're going to go into Q&A. So this seems like a good spot for it.
Yes, perfect.
It was a wonderful chat with you, Lauren. Thank you. And Jen, thank you so much.
I can't wait till we can actually do it in person.
Yes.
All right. Thank you both. This has been amazing. We do have a few questions for you. So the first one, we've talked about women supporting women through networking, but could you speak a little bit about how these women supporting each other can maybe translate into sharing experience and providing guidance, and any examples you may have seen speaking to that?
Do you want to take that, Lauren?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's so important to think about women as mentors for other women. And there are definitely projects that we've initiated where we have found women who are successful in their communities, who are willing to mentor then younger women who may be, starting their own business and are looking for that level of support or connections. So definitely looking at that kind of networking and mentorship and guidance aspect is really incredibly important. And I think in so many of the communities that we work with, older women are really culture holders, right? They hold the culture. So to the extent that you can get them on board with empowering the younger women and bringing younger women up in ways that kind of lifts them and helps them engage in economic activity and access products and services is really so important. Zubaida, you want to add anything?
No, I would just say that we articulate that beautifully in the way we represent Grameen as well, is to say when we work in poverty alleviation, when we teach one woman how to do it, then she goes ahead and teaches many more. And so it is a cumulative outcome that we see, because when we enable women, when we create ecosystems for them, they are pulling other women in, because women know the importance of a community being successful, right? If their child is the only educated child, they know that their community is not going anywhere. They want their neighbor's child to be educated, their cousin's child to be educated. They want to teach the entrepreneurial skills and opportunities to others. And I think it's a very cumulative outcome and successful outcome that we've seen, and it's very, very important, and we believe in that, and we see that happen in our work every day.
Yeah, one example, we talk a lot about kind of agents at Grameen, and really they're just people who have a job whose job is to help other people. And one of the agents that Grameen often works with are mobile money agents. So in Africa, you don't have ATMs, you have mobile money agents. They're people who do your financial transactions for you. And what we found is that when you have, most agents tend to be men because of the qualifications. And when you work with the telco operators to bring up female mobile money agents, then more female customers come, right? Because they trust female agents, right? They're not harassed by them, but also female agents will take the time to teach other women how to use mobile money, and male agents have no time for that. And so and it's just one great example of when women have a business, they make sure that other women in their community benefit from that, whether it's their being a mobile money agent, whether it's being an agricultural agent, they make sure that they're reaching other women in their communities. And I think it's such just a testament to who women are and how we really look out for each other.
Thank you. Now, rolling into our next question, speaking of education, this participant says, in most families in Zambia with low income, they prefer to educate boys in thinking of their future responsibilities, while girls are seen as recipients. And so I think the question gets to shifting the power dynamics here. And so how can you help, we help, Grameen help in uplifting girls to get this education, whether that's, I think the question asker is talking maybe access to formal education as well as maybe a cultural education they need in such an environment.
No, and I think that's not just a Zambian problem. For whom I was asking the question, I think it's a pretty global phenomena, right? Where people believe that if you educate men, they're going to be the breadwinners of the family, and that and women are they're looked at as objects of or vessels of giving birth for to a future generation, right? And I think again that comes with us only trying to educate, only trying to tell women how much power they have, and not including men in that conversation. I think it's important for us to create systems where women are seen as powerful and their education is seen as a powerful leverage to move forward. And I think there is a lack of urgency in it. And there is, again, this whole conversation of not including men that leads to such decisions in a household, right? Drawing a tangent from the HPV vaccine that we are talking about, we know that HPV vaccine reduces incidence of many, many types of cancers in both men and women. But now globally, we are only promoting the HPV vaccine to women. And we're saying that, well, if we start giving vaccines to both men and women, then the women are going to be left behind. And I was like, that's such that goes against the morality of public health. But then we are forced to make decisions like that. But again, we make decisions in silos and not bring men into the conversation, right? And so it's very important for us to be able to have those conversations with men, so we deal with these situations. It's not going to happen by us creating powerful women. It's going to You need powerful men to make the decisions on their daughters being educated so that they can listen to the voices of their women. And going back to our household dialogues, I think we've seen a lot of education conversation happen in those household dialogues where such decisions are made. And like Lauren rightly mentioned, those conversations don't happen, and encouraging many more such conversations, bringing men to the table, I think is the only solution. Would you add anything, Lauren?
I would not, Zubaida. I think you said it perfectly. I would just echo that the questioner, because if you look at long-term evidence, the one thing that has the most impact on a woman's poverty level is her education level globally. And so making sure that we're having those conversations and that households are able to prioritize girls' education is critical.
And I think also from a donor landscape perspective, we only see about 2 to 5% of funding going towards women and girls, and a minute percentage of that going towards education, right? I think there is also this whole mismatch of resource allocation to the real problems, again, coming from the decision makers being men who don't necessarily understand the issue and have never been talked about to that level.
So, thank you. And so our last question today, we've talked about women supporting women. We've talked about he for she, what can people sitting here on this webinar today do to help? What sort of volunteering or other opportunities might we have available for people who really want to help women and girls show up with their power?
Zubaida, I'll let you take that one.
Sure. No, I think for the audience here, I think just being a voice, I think, we underestimate the importance of every word that we say, which can echo to much larger extent. So even as simple as talking about our campaign, Invest in Her Power, which is going to be a lot about moving away from the empowerment conversation, putting women and girls at the center. I think from a very selfish perspective, to promote Grameen and our vision would be very useful. So please go ahead, talk about our campaign, talk about the work that Grameen does, but overall show up. Show up for women and girls, speak up when you see an opportunity, be a voice. As much as we believe that our words don't have impact in today's day and age, I think it's the small droplets that make the ocean. And so it's very important that we all have a voice and we use it, and specifically use it in a meaningful way, that we are not enabling systems that are not dismantling patriarchy, but promoting it, right? And so it's very important for us to use our voice and say what we believe is true and right, and validate that and support organizations that do that work. Lauren?
No, I would agree completely. And I think, we're coming up on International Women's Day. It's a great day to do exactly what you guys are doing, kind of raise your awareness about the issues that are impacting women in developing countries, and then become join with them and be a voice with them to address their issues. I think we're moving into a space where we talk less about doing things for women in developing countries and talk more about doing things with women in developing countries. I think one of the important things is to help create spaces where those women can identify what their agenda is, and we can come along and support them in achieving their agenda versus us imposing an agenda. And so the more all of us can help create those spaces is really important.
So we've gotten several comments on the Q&A here that just say thank you for the arguments, for addressing the real needs of women. And I'd like to echo the people who are sitting here today and saying thank you so much, the both of you, for the wonderful conversation. And thank you to all the attendees today, and to everyone who registered. We hope you found this meaningful. We will be sending out a recording after the event to make sure that everyone gets a chance to hear this. And, we're coming up on the end here. So thank you both. Thank you, Zubaida. Thank you, Lauren. And thanks, everyone. All the Grameenis here. You're all honorary Grameenis today. So we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks, Jen, so much for organizing this. It was wonderful. Zubaida, so great to get a chance to talk to you one-on-one.
No, thank you, Lauren, and thank you, Jen, and thank you everyone for attending. I think this is the first step in supporting women and girls in a very meaningful way, is to take your time and listen to a random conversation like this that you believe is about women and girls, and kind of echoing your voice from here is very important. And let's all move towards investing in her power and work towards creating an equitable world for all of us that our future generations can live in. Thank you again, and thank you, everyone. Appreciate it. Happy Women's Day, everyone.